This is a reading of Richard Wagner's prose works, and this is from 1850 and it is entitled Judaism in Music. Judaism in Music by Richard Wagner, translated by William Ashton Ellis. Original title Das Judentum in der Musik, published in 1850 in the Sämtliche Schriften und Dichtungen, Volume 5, pages 66 to 85, later republished in the Theatre, which is Volume 3 of Richard Wagner's prose works, published in 1894. Judaism in Music. In the Neue Zeitschrift für Musik not long ago, mention was made of an, quote, Hebraic art taste, end quote. An attack and a defence of that expression neither did nor could stay lacking. Now it seems to myself not unimportant to clear up the matter lying at the bottom of all this, a matter either glossed over by our critics hitherto or touched with a certain outburst of excitement. It would not be a question, however, of saying something new, but of explaining that unconscious feeling which proclaims itself among the people as a rooted dislike of the Jewish nature, thus of speaking out a something really existent and by no means of attempting to artfully breathe life into an unreality through the force of any sort of fancy. Criticism goes against its very essence if, in attack or defence, it tries for anything else. Since it here is merely in respect of art, and specially of music, that we want to explain to ourselves the popular dislike of the Jewish nature, even at the present day, we may completely pass over any dealing with this same phenomenon in the field of religion and politics. In religion, the Jews have long ceased to be our hated foes, thanks to all those who within the Christian religion itself have drawn upon themselves the people's hatred. In pure politics, we have never come to actual conflict with the Jews. We have even granted them the erection of a Jerusalemitic realm, and in this respect we have rather had to regret that Herr von Rothschild was too keen-witted to make himself king of the Jews, preferring, as it is well known, to remain, quote, the Jew of the kings, end quote. It is another matter where politics become a question of society. Here the isolation of the Jews has been held by us a challenge to the exercise of human justice, for just so long as in ourselves the thrust towards social liberation has woken into plainer consciousness. When we strove for emancipation of the Jews, however, we virtually were more the champions of an abstract principle than of a concrete case, just as all our liberalism was not a very lucid mental sport, since we went for freedom of the folk without knowledge of that folk itself, nay, with a dislike of any genuine contact with it, so our eagerness to level up the rights of Jews was far rather stimulated by a general idea than by any real sympathy. For, with all our speaking and writing in favour of the Jews' emancipation, we always felt instinctively repelled by any actual operative contact with them. Here then we touch the point that brings us closer to our main inquiry. We have to explain to ourselves the involuntary repellence possessed for us by the nature and personality of the Jews, so as to vindicate that instinctive dislike which we plainly recognise as stronger and more overpowering than our conscious zeal to rid ourselves thereof. Even today, we only purposely belie ourselves in this regard when we think necessary to hold immoral and taboo all open proclamation of our natural repugnance against the Jewish nature. Only in quite the latest times do we seem to have reached an insight that it is more rational to rid ourselves of that strenuous self-deception, so as quite soberly, instead of our violent sympathy, and bring ourselves to understand a repugnance still abiding with us in spite of all our liberal bedazzlements. To our astonishment, we perceive that in our liberal battles we have been floating in the air and fighting clouds, whereas the whole fair soil of material reality has found an appropriator whom our aerial flights have very much amused, no doubt, yet who holds us far too foolish to reward us by relaxing one iota of his usurpation of that material soil. Quite imperceptibly, the creditor of kings has become the king of creeds, and we really cannot take this monarch's pleading for emancipation as otherwise than uncommonly naive, seeing that it is much rather we who are shifted into the necessity of fighting for emancipation from the Jews. According to the present constitution of this world, the Jew in truth is already more than emancipate. He rules and will rule so long as money remains the power before which all our doings and our dealings lose their force. That the historical adversity of the Jews and the rapacious rawness of Christian German potentates have brought this power within the hands of Israel's sons. This needs no argument of ours to prove. That the impossibility of carrying farther any natural, any necessary and truly beauteous thing upon the basis of that stage where the evolution of our arts has now arrived, and without a total alteration of that basis, that this also brought the public art taste of our time between the busy fingers of the Jews, however, is the matter whose grounds we here have to consider somewhat closer. What their thralls have toiled and moiled to pay the liege laws of the Roman and medieval world, today is turned to money by the Jew. Who thinks of noticing that the guileless-looking scrap of paper is slimy with the blood of countless generations? What the heroes of the arts, with untold strain, consuming leaf and life, have wrestled from the art fiend of 2 millennia of misery, today the Jew converts into art bazaar, who sees it in the mannered bric-a-brac, that it is glued together by the hallowed brow sweat of the genius of 2,000 years. We have no need to first substantiate the bedewing of modern art. It springs to the eye and thrusts upon the senses of itself. Much too far afield, again, did we undertake to explain this phenomenon by a demonstration of the character of our art history itself. But if emancipation from the yoke of Judaism appears to us the greatest of necessities, we must hold it weighty above all to prove our forces for this war of liberation. Now we shall never win these forces from an abstract definition of that phenomenon per se, but only from an accurate acquaintance with the nature of that involuntary feeling of ours, which utters itself as an instinctive repugnance against the Jew's prime essence. Through this unconquerable feeling, if we avow it, quite without ado, must there become plain to us what we hate in that essence, what we then know definitely we can make head against. Nay, through his very long laying bare, may we even hope to rout the demon from the field, whereon he has only been able to maintain his stand beneath the shelter of a twilight darkness, a darkness we good-natured humanists ourselves have cast upon him to make his look less loathly. The Jew, who everyone knows has a God all to himself, in ordinary life strikes us primarily by his outward appearance, which no no matter to what European nationality we belong, has something disagreeably foreign to that nationality. Instinctively, we wish to have nothing in common with a man who looks like that. This must heretofore have passed as a misfortune for the Jew. In more recent times, however, we perceive that in the midst of this misfortune, he feels entirely well. After all his successes, he needs must deem his difference from us a pure distinction. Passing over the moral side in the effect of this, in itself unpleasant freak of nature, and coming to its bearings upon art, we here will merely observe that to us this exterior can never be thinkable as a subject for the art of representment. If plastic art wants to present us with the Jew, it mostly takes its model from sheer fantasy, with a prudent ennobling or entire omission of just everything that characterizes for us in common life the Jew's appearance. But the Jew never wanders onto the theatre boards. The exceptions are so rare and special that they only confirm the general rule. We can conceive no representation of an antique or modern stage character by a Jew, be it as hero or lover, without feeling instinctively the incongruity of such a notion. This is of great weight. A man whose appearance we must hold unfitted for artistic treatment, not merely in this or that personality, but according to his kind in general. Neither can we hold him capable of any sort of artistic utterance of his inner essence. By far more weighty, nay, of quite decisive weight for our inquiry, is the effect of the Jew produces on us through his speech, and this is the essential point of which the sound of the Jewish influence upon music. The Jew speaks the language of a nation in whose midst he dwells from generation to generation, but he speaks it always as an alien. As it lies beyond our present scope to occupy ourselves with the cause of this phenomenon, too, we may equally abstain from any arraignment of Christian civilization for having kept the Jew in violent severance from it, as on the other hand, in touching the sequelae of that severance, we can scarcely propose to make the Jews the answerable party. Our only subject here is to throw light on the aesthetic character of the said results. In the first place, then, the general circumstance that the Jew talks the modern European languages merely as learnt and not as mother tongues most necessarily debar him from all capability of therein expressing himself idiomatically, independently, and conformably to his nature. A language with its expression and its evolution is not the work of scattered units, but of an historic community. Only he who has unconsciously grown up within the bond of this community takes also any share in its creations. But the Jew has stood outside the pale of any such community, stood solitary with his Jehovah in a splintered, soilless stock, to which all self-sprung evolution must stay denied, just as ever the peculiar Hebraic language of that stock has been preserved for him merely as a thing defunct. Now to make poetry in a foreign tongue has hitherto been impossible, even to geniuses of highest rank. Our whole European art and civilization, however, has remained to the Jew a foreign tongue. For, just as he has taken no part in the evolution of the one, so he has taken none in that of the other, but at most the homeless mite has been a cold, nay more, a hostile looker-on. In this speech, this art, the Jew can only after-speak and after-patch, not truly making a poem of his words, an artwork of his doings. In particular, does the purely physical aspect of the Jewish mode of speech repel us? Throughout an intercourse of 2 millennia with European nations, culture has not succeeded in breaking the remarkable stubbornness of the Jewish natural as regards the peculiarities of Semitic pronunciation. The first thing that strikes our ear as quite outlandish and unpleasant in the Jews' production of voice sounds is the creaking, squeaking, buzzing snuffle. Add thereto an employment of words in a sense quite foreign to our nation's tongue, and an arbitrary twisting of the structure of our phrases, and this mode of speaking acquires at once the character of an intolerably jumbled blabber. So that when we hear this Jewish talk, our attention dwells involuntarily on its repulsive how, rather on any meaning of its intrinsic what. How exceptionally weighty is this circumstance, particularly for explaining the impression made on us by the music works of modern Jews, must be recognized and borne in mind before all else. If we hear a Jew speak, we are unconsciously offended by entire want of pure human expression in his discourse. The cold indifference of this peculiar blubber never by any chance rises the ardour of a higher, heartfelt passion. If, on the other hand, we find ourselves driven to this more heated expression in converse with a Jew, he will always shuffle off, since he is incapable of replying in kind. Never does the Jew excite himself in mutual interchange of feelings with us, but so far as we are concerned, only in the altogether special egoistic interests of his vanity or profit, a thing which, coupled with the wry expression of his daily mode of speech, always gives to such excitement a tinge of the ridiculous, and may rouse anything you please in us, only not sympathy with the interests of the speaker. Though we may well deem it thinkable that in intercourse with one another, and in particular where domestic life brings pure human feelings to an outburst, even the Jews may be able to give expression to their emotions in a manner effective enough among themselves. Yet this cannot come within our present purview, since we here are listening to the Jew who, in the intercourse of life and art, expressly speaks to us. Now, if the aforesaid qualities of his dialect make the Jew almost incapable of giving artistic enunciation to his feelings and beholdings through talk, for such an enunciation through song his aptitude must needs be infinitely smaller. Song is just talk aroused to higher passion, music the speech of passion. All that works repellently upon us in his outward appearance and his speech makes us take to our heels at last in his song, providing we are not held prisoners by the very ridicule of this phenomenon. Very naturally, in song, the vividest and most indisputable expression of the personal emotional being, the peculiarity of the Jewish nature attains for us its climax of distastefulness, and on any nature hypothesis we might hold the Jew adapted for every sphere of art except whose basis lies in song.